In this lab session, we are going to configure cnMaestro on-premise, and using two V5000 radios, we're going to onboard a E2E controller and establish a PTP link. So this Cambium 60 GHz radios are called cnWave. cnWave is a 802.11ay standard. It supports mesh and is Telegraph certified. The radios can do up to 10 plus gigabits per second. This is mainly for the V5000. It can be configured in point-to-point, point-to-multipoint in mesh configuration, and it is managed through cnMaestro. So in this, here are the types of deployments using a 60 gig. The top right, we have the standalone PTP link or links that you have. Typically, we recommend using the onboard E2E controller, where one of the radios acts as a POP TN. We prefer the onboard E2E controller for that, since it's just two radios. And we have cnMaestro on-premise or cnMaestro cloud supported if you want to manage this kind of a setup. On the top right, we have the point-to-multipoint network, which also extends it to a few point-to-point as well. So if you want to have an extended small network which includes a few point-to-point and a few point-to-multipoint, typically up to about 20 devices, this would be the style of doing it. You would want to use the onboard E2E controller for up to 20 devices, or you can use an external E2E controller for more than 20 devices. And cnMaestro on-premise and cnMaestro clouds are both supported for this kind of configuration. Now the bottom, we have the mesh network, which is many POP sites, a large number of subscribers, and a lot of mesh loops that are created. And for this purpose, we recommend using only external E2E controller where you have multiple POPs, and for monitoring cnMaestro on-premise or cnMaestro cloud, both are supported for this one. So in this example, in this lab session, we are going to focus on cnMaestro on-premise and cnMaestro onboard E2E controller. So this video is broken down into 4 easy steps. The first one is configuring the cnMaestro on-premise on laptop. So the laptop is configured with 192.168.1.11, and on that I'll be installing the cnMaestro on-premise using a VMware. And then the IP address that will be assigned over there is 192.168.1.40. Then using a wide link, I'll be accessing the V5000 POP TN device. So that's a POP device with the IP address 192.168.1.2. And I will be establishing a link with the TN with the IP address 192.168.1.3. After the link is established, I'll try to ensure that the link is active and stable. So some key minor things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing the V5000s. Make sure the V5000s are not exactly facing straight. The reason is the V5000s have it's a dual sector, so it has 2 sectors. So aiming them right in the center may not be best. As the image indicated on the right is probably better. So just tilting each of the radios slightly gives you a better bore sight and much easier challenge with respect to alignments or any reflection you have, because that's the best link that you can form in the lab. For using V3000s, so first of all, always ensure that you remove the antenna part of the V3000s, that we have removed it over here. The second one is the red arrow indicates the RF direction. So let's say typically the V3000 has the tile over here and it reflects off of this and then kind of goes straight. Whereas once you remove the tile, the link is actually the RF is actually going to go in these directions. So the setup over here in the middle is incorrect, so that's why it's marked X. Ideally you would want to have it rotated on the table so that the tile over here kind of goes in the direction of the other tile over here, so that you can form a link, assuming this is a table that you have put it on top of. So rotating the V3000s in the correct direction is ideal. Otherwise the RFs are going to go in the opposite direction if you keep it in this configuration, and the link can never be formed, or it's challenging to form a link, or it may be unstable because it may be bouncing off of different walls to reach there. This is a setup for V1000, fairly straightforward. So just make sure that they are facing each other. It doesn't matter if it is bent and lying on the power supply over here, as long as they are pointing fairly close to each other or fairly aligned, it should not be a problem. So I think out of the 3, aligning the V1000 is probably the easiest. So these are just quick tips, and now let's get into setting up the radios.
Hello everyone. In this section we'll be showing you how to configure on-premise cnMaestro. So you can use any Windows machine. So I'm using a Windows 10 to set this up. So all you will need is the Oracle VMware VirtualBox, and you would need to download the OVA for the cnMaestro on-premise. So if we go to download, so we have different variants for that. So if you go to support.cambiumnetworks.com, you should be able to download the cnMaestro on-premise 3.0 version. So I'm going to select that here, click OK. It's going to come up on the top, click OK, say agree, and this is the first step on importing it into the virtual machine. So let me show you where you can download that in the meantime. So we have support.cambiumnetwork.com. So you go to downloads, and then if you scroll all the way down to 60 gig cnWave, here you will find the user guide, release notes, quick start guide, and the device images. The latest one is 1.0.1. But if you want the cnMaestro version, you'll have to scroll down all the way to cnMaestro over here, management tools, and in the current 3.0 we have to use that. So this 3.0.2 is mainly for the CBRS fix, but what we are interested in is the 3.0.0 OVA. So we'll need to download this file. It's a pretty big file, 3.5 GB. It may take some time, but you need to download this. We also have the user guide and release notes associated with that. Right. So looks like we have loaded it on by importing it. Now we are going to start this VM. Okay, so it takes maybe 1 or 2 minutes to start. Okay, so the login is Cambium, CAMBIUM, and the password is cnMaestro, CNMAESTRO. So you should be able to log in. So then you have to go to next, go to networks. I'm configuring a IPv4 network, so I'm going to click here. I'm going to make it static because my radio is connected directly to my laptop, so I'll be configuring it through here. So I'm going to put a 192 address, so 192.168.1.40. The mask will be 255.255.255.0, and the gateway will be 192.168.1.1. I'm going to put yes, and this should be enough for you to create the cnMaestro account. Right, so this is good. Now we can access that. So let's go back. So if you go to information tab, you should see this /24 address. For you to register over here to see if you can log into that, it may or may not work because you may have to provide a 192.168.1.40 IP address. So what we're going to do is go to our Ethernet setting, go to Ethernet, go to adapter options, go to IPv4, we're going to go advanced. We are going to add a we've already added a 192.168.1.11. So you can click here and add. If you don't have it, you can click here and add a slash 192.168.1.x IP address. So with that, we can close that. So then once you click here, if you refresh, sometimes it takes a little time. So the first time you log in, the user ID password is going to be admin, all small letters over here. And then you'll have to choose the country. So this makes it easier. So I'm going to choose India. And for time zone, I'm going to use Kolkata. That's plus 5.5 hours. And then it'll ask you to change it to your custom password. So I'm going to put Cambium123. Going to check that. Yep. Then Cambium123, and then that's the change part of it. So it'll ask me to log in again, so that's fine. Admin and then CAMBIUM123. So Cambium123 is my own password. You can put in whatever you want, but the first time you log in, it has to be admin, right? So this is the way basically you set up the cnMaestro on your VM, and this is the way you access it. In the next module, we'll see how you can add the V5000 device that we're going to use and connect it to your cnMaestro on-premise account. In this section, we'll see how you can add your POP-TN to the cnMaestro on-premise that we have just created in the previous video. To access the device, the default IP address is 169.254.1.1 for the V5000 device we have, and the user ID is admin, and password also is admin. We have a firmware version of 1.0.1 beta 5. We can upgrade it later on by going to software, browse, and you can upgrade it to the 1.0.1 for firmware later on. So in this one, we will not do that. We'll focus on mainly how to get it to the onboard controller. So how to add to the onboard controller. So once you go to the onboard E2E controller, actually before that you have to configure the IP address, because this is a 169 IP address and your cnMaestro is 192, and there's no way for it to connect to that. So what I'm going to do is make this a 192.168.1.2 and make the mask 255.255.255. If you want to give a gateway to the 192.168.1.1, that's fine, but I think in this case it should be okay. So we have successfully applied this change. So ideally we should be able to see if we can do a ping to that. So I'm going to ping 92.168.1.2 and just run this text. Looks like it is up. So what I'm going to do is close this, come back here and do 192.168.1.2, and then same as last time to admin to log into the device. Now I'm going to go to the E2E controller and I have to enable it. Before I enable it, I need to go to cnMaestro and create the on-premise version. So I'm going to go to onboard and settings, and in settings I'm going to delete the prior one and say you have to check this box. Basically you want to create a cnMaestro ID. So I'm going to go to new. The administrative role is administrator, and the password I'm going to use is Cambium123, CAMBIUM123. I'm going to save this. Right, so this is automatically saved. I just need to remember the password, so I'm going to go to enable. In this case it will ask you the site name, so I'm just going to call this POP-TN. Lat long you can fill in. I just put in some specific lat long, whichever you want, and then you can go to the device name and fill that part as well. Looks like it's stalling for a bit. Let's see why. Okay, let's wait for the video to stop hanging. Okay, so now we're going to add the longitude, so 20.001. 001, gonna make this change as well. Okay, so this is the POP-TN, this is the lat long. So device, I'm just gonna make this POP-TN. So typically we have the site name, which is the location, and then on that site what device you want to add. This IP address I think is okay. We want to enable L2 bridging. This will allow us to traffic IPv4 traffic. For cnMaestro, here you have to click enable, and then you have to put in your 192.168.1.40, which is our IP address over here, and then your Cambium ID will be cnMaestro underscore on underscore premise, and the onboarding key will be the password that we created last time, so it will be cambium123, right? You can just double check that and then say okay. It may take a couple of minutes for it to enable. We should see that fairly soon. Creating a default node. Right, so looks like it is being running, so it is in discovery mode, so hopefully that should come up. Now let's look at the topology. So in this case we have added a site location based on the lat long. We've added a node which is online, which means we can access, so it is available for us to configure and change if required. Here is the links. We'll get to it in the next section, but this is the link over here. So let's go back to our cnMaestro. Okay, so this is step one. The step two is you have to go to your cnMaestro to enable it. So you have to go to monitor and manage, and there should be one message that should pop up over here once it starts to connect. Oh, the reason it's not going to connect is because the firmware needs to be upgraded to the latest one. So let's do that actually. So what I'm going to do is upgrade software. I'm going to choose this one. I'm going to choose the firmware. So I'm going to prepare. I'm going to select the firmware that I want to upgrade. Actually, before that, I need to add the image. So I'm going to upload an image for the V5000 and V3000. Right, because the default version doesn't support cnMaestro, so you have to upgrade that. So now that is there. So I'm going to choose this, go to prepare. I'm going to select the V5000, V3000. They share the same one. I'm going to keep an upgrade timeout. These I think could be standard, so we don't need to change anything. Do a save, and then we have to commit, right? And then say save. Oops, it is failing because it is being upgraded right now. Okay, so let's come back in maybe 2-3 minutes, I think, or maybe up to 4-5 minutes for the upgrading to be completed. You can continue to monitor your IP address. So looks like I was just monitoring for a few minutes, for a few seconds, and looks like the device is being upgraded right now. So maybe it may take 2 to 5 minutes depending on depending on the firmware and where we are for it to be loaded. So I'll continue once the firmware is upgraded. Okay, it looks like the device was upgraded, so the pings are back. So it took about 2 to 3 minutes for the firmware. It may take a little longer, but it's not too bad. Okay, so I'm gonna log into the controller again. So on the device again, 192.168.1.1.2. admin, and we can see the firmware has been upgraded to 1.0.1. Now it's trying to initialize with the cnMaestro. Hopefully this time we should see the pop-up message come up. Okay, so we're going to try to set in the onboard key again. So it will be CAMBIUM123, CAMBIUM123, and then we're going to do a submit. So basically we're trying to set the cnMaestro configuration again to see if it will be discovered. Okay, so we did get this message. So this is an important E2E controller that's been configured on the cnMaestro, which is relating to the E2E controller over here. So a replica or a copy of that is present on cnMaestro. In case this doesn't come up, one quick tip would be to maybe restart your VM machine. So that could be one of the reasons why this may not be there. So in case even if you update the key, it doesn't show up. Just feel free to disable your VMware, just save and shut down and then reboot, and ideally that should do the trick. So the first thing that you do over here is go and then you approve this approve message. Basically this says in your cnMaestro account a new E2E network is being added. This E2E is present in the POP-DN, right? So once you say approve, you can mention it as a specific name, but in this case we can save as default. It may take a couple of minutes for you to configure the E2E controller. So okay, looks like, yeah, so this is set up. So right now you have access to the V5000 DN, which is exactly over here. So the same device over here is being shown up in the cnMaestro account. And then if you want anything specific such as configuration, or you can see the lat longs over here. This we can close. Any notifications, alarms, alerts we can start to configure later on. But right now we have a POP-DN added to the cnMaestro with our IP address, IPv6 address, and this thing. Okay. In the next section, we'll be seeing how you can add another DN and then create a link on the cnMaestro server. In this section, we'll see how you can add another DN and then create a link from there. You can add a link directly through your device by logging in, or you can add it through cnMaestro. In this section, it makes sense for us to start using cnMaestro so that we can deploy multiple nodes. The first thing you need to be seeing about is how do you add different sites. So we already have created a first site. Now we're going to add a second site. I'm going to call it DN as a site. The altitude is 0 for our reference sake. Over here it will be 10.000.002, and then it will be 20.002. Right, it will be a DN, and I'm going to save that over there. So there will be a device created over here. At this DN, I'm going to add a node, right? So I'm going to close that. So the node name will be DN. It is a DN. So in case if you want to connect it to a multi-point or a subscriber, it will be a CN. It is not a POP node because the POP node has already been created. For this one, the IP address is 3120D. The model that we have is a V5000 over here. If you had selected CN, the V1000 would have shown up. And if you want IPv4, here you can set the IP address to 192.168.1.3, right, and have that specific subnet mask. Right, and then say save. Okay, so now you have created the link. You have created a device over here and provided some IP address. Now you have to connect this link to over here. So now what you have to do is go here and add a link. And in this case, it's a wired link. So wireless link. If you are trying to use a wired link, is basically on the same pole you want to connect back to back. You have to use that. So in our case, we are connecting the POP-DN. And we're choosing the sector 1, so you can see the colored option, and then we're choosing the DN on the other side, and we're going to choose the sector 2 that is being collected, right? And then we're going to save. The orientation depends on how you have rotated it. In my case, I've just used 00 because I'm doing a lab testing, but in the field deployment you have to ideally write the exact azimuth elevation so that you can precisely calculate if it falls under sector 1 or sector 2. So in this case, I'm going to hit save. So now a link has been created over here. You have to activate the second device. There's a few things we have to configure on the POP-DN itself for this link to become active. So we'll go to POP-DN. We can go to the configuration over here. The lat longs look okay. Now we'll go to the node side. Node also looks okay. Now we're going to go to the POP-DN itself and look at the configuration. Basic configuration looks okay. From radio perspective, I'm going to click here as a short range. The reason is this is being done in a lab, which is less than 25 meters. So I'm going to select that. MCS modulation, I'm going to keep it standard from 2 to 12. Channel sector 1 is being utilized in our case, so we're using channel 2. So it shouldn't make much of a difference because we are only engaging sector 1. Here actually you have to enable force GPS. So this basically means if you're testing indoor, by default all the radios will be deployed outside, so you don't need to check it. But if you're testing it indoor, the device will look for a GPS signal. But of course, since you're indoor, there will be no GPS signal. So this will disregard it. This is typically only done for lab testing, right? But if you're doing it outdoor, this should be unchecked. So I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to go to the DN and try to do the same thing. So I'm going to go, this is the site DN, so I'm going to go to the site DN radio. Of course it is offline, so I'm going to go to the configuration. IP address, MAC address is already there, so no need to change that. ERP, again I'm going to make this short. This is okay. 2 to 12 is okay. Here we are using sector 2, so this one is, if you specifically want to change that, that's okay. You can, but I think it should be good for now. Here again you have to choose force GPS disable and save. Right, so you have successfully overridden the nodes over here. Now, since even though we have changed it over here, you have to still log into the remote device and make the same change over there. I'll show you how to do that now. Now let's log into the device. The device is default configuration, so I'm configuring the slave now. This other the DN, not the POP DN. So the default IP address for that is 169.254.1.1 because that has not been configured yet. So we have to log into the device, change the IP address to 192.168.1.3 so that we can access it from there. So I'm going to proceed over here. So this again uses default user ID password as admin. You log into the device. I'm going to go to configuration node. I'm going to make this to 192.168.1.3. Make this 255.255.255. And mainly in the radio, I'm going to submit this change. Oh, it's going to reboot. Probably I should, yeah. I go to the radio, make this short range, because once the link is configured, then you can change it from cnMaestro. But the first time you log in over here, you have to click force disable. So you're logging into the device for the first time, you have to force disable it. Click submit. Now let's see. So we have clicked submit. So what I'm going to do is close this tab, open another tab, 192.168.1.3. So I don't know if the change was set, so I'm going to go back to configuration, scroll down in radios. I'm going to check here, and now I'm going to submit this change. So it is set correctly. Make this short range as well. Right. So now I'm going to go back to the my main cnMaestro to see if the link is being set up. I can check that over here as well if there is a network configured or if the radio is being able to figure out. Now we are back in the cnMaestro and the POP DN location. So I've made those change for it to be force GPS disabled. We can check over here. We can go to the E2E controller, go to notification or dashboard and see the link is being trying to establish over here. But it's not connected to the other side. So let's go through why and what we need to change. Right, so we go to links over here, and if you see the message over here, it says keep alive is no, wireless type, and it is ignited about 125 times. Right, so this is a good thing. So it is trying to connect to it at least a few times. So we can check in the POP DN as well. So you can go to configuration. Maybe not nodes, so we can go to topology links. We are seeing that the ignition attempts is happening. The distance is about 100 odd meters, but actually it's in the lab. So let's wait maybe a minute or so, and ideally this should come up. Till then we can double check our configuration. Basically till then let me go through this one. So L2 bridging should be enabled if you want to use IPv4. Tunnel concentrator is if you want it to go through a specific one, you have to configure it, but this is more of an advanced feature, not recommended for like lab testing. Prefix allocation, you have to just click generate. It generates a seed prefix. You can use that. Country, you have to choose other. Here if you want to set it to other channels, you can just choose 1, 2, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it'll choose all the 4 channels, but in this case I'm just going to keep it at 2. I'm not going to save, so I'm going to cancel that. And this manage E2E controller should be enabled. This beam scanning is enabled. So basically what this means is at a regular interval, the radio scans for a best optimization. So ideally you don't want to do it every 5 minutes or something like that, I think, but you typically want to do it every few hours to see if something has changed. You try to optimize it once in a while, right? So now we see the link is active, so that's great, that's good news. So let's go back to the cnMaestro one. The first time it may show yes and no. What was actually happening in this case is all the configuration file is being loaded from the POP TN to DN, so there may be a few minutes where it may go up and down, so we have to be a little patient, at least for the first time, for the DN to DN come up, right? So another thing which we can think of doing is enabling and disabling ignition. So you can right click here and you can send a dissociate to Z, and then it will ask yes, link is already down, so you can enable it. So you can do enable ignition to see if this will kick off the ignition attempts. Send association to A. Let's see in the statistics tab. So typically if the link is set up, you should start to see a couple of rows over here which provide link statistics as well. From here we are seeing this radio is being another thing to keep in mind is to see what firmware the DN is on. Actually we didn't check that, so let's go back to the DN to see which firmware is loaded. Now we have come back to the subscriber device, so the DN, to see which firmware. So it is loaded the 1.0.1, so which is the latest firmware. Now let's go back to the so it looks like that should be okay. Can we see a link up? We see some sort of throughput and one link is up. Let's go back to the cnMaestro. Okay, looks like the link is active now. Basically what I did was I just rebooted the slave device or the DN device and just reset. But looks like the link is active. That is the only change I did. So we can see the RSSI is next 61, which is good. Resting MCS is 9, which is also good. Resting MCS is also 9. So we have added it over here. So in the cnMaestro as well, I think if you reboot it or refresh, it should get reflected as well. So I'm going to see if, let's see why it is not being reflected. Okay, so let me do a refresh to see if things would have changed. Or what you can do is just close this and start again. So sometimes the state machine could get stuck, especially if you have rebooted the device or some other device kind of thing. I think if you do that, it should be good. Okay, let's see. So wait for this to go down and then come up, and then we should see. So it went down, so it came up. Start, and then let's see. It should okay, it is restoring. So let's see. Maybe in a minute or so it should come up. Okay, so looks like it's up. You can check the network info. This is good. In case your tab gets stuck here, you can just do a right click, which is mentioned over here, and that should free you up from this smaller window in case you get stuck. Okay, so we have to see why these two devices are saying it is still offline, even though I think the cnMaestro status changes. Okay, let's see if we refresh this. Okay, so yeah, looks like it's up. So basically the problem was the onboard status once I rebooted was taking a few minutes to connect, but once it's connected, so this is a green link, and then this link automatically reflects that it's a green link as well. So you can configure the radios and links and see the testing. So if you start pumping traffic, you should see the capacity and all that stuff, right? So this is the basic way. I know it's a little long video, but this is the way you can configure your POP-DN, your cnMaestro first, POP-DN, and the subscriber, and then connect it all on cnMaestro. Going forward, if you want to add another DN to DN, all you have to do is first create a site, and then add a radio onto the first you create a site. Once you add a site, you can add another node on that site, and then make links going forward. And each time you do that, the subscriber, especially if it's in the lab, you would need to configure the correct firmware which we showed, and then you have to disable the forced GPS, and that should automatically get it to work. All right, okay, thank you.